Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now, let's get started. I was born into a world made of cold breath and heavy sky, where silence wasn't peaceful, it was watchful. The trees stood like ancient guards, thick-barked and brittle, their branches etched with frost even in the early light. My first memories aren't of lullabies or laughter, but of wind howling through narrow canyons and the scent of damp fur from our family huddled beside the fire. We didn't call ourselves Neanderthals. That name belongs to your time. We had no written language, no history books, and certainly no TikTok. What we had were stories carved into bone warnings, murmured at night, and eyes that knew how to look past shadows. I didn't know. I was a fading chapter in the history of humankind. I just knew hunger, kinship, and cold. Our band, 23 souls the last time I counted, moved between caves like tides following herds and seasons. Our leader, a blunt-toothed elder with half a jaw missing, spoke only when he had to. We listened. You didn't ignore a man who once bit the ear off a cave lion and lived to grunt about it. Now, just so you know, scientifically, we Neanderthals weren't the primitive oafs people once imagined. We had brains larger than yours. That's right. Take that calculus. We buried our dead with care, used pigments, crafted tools that would make your modern survival influencers cry, and made jewelry from eagle claws. That's not a metaphor, actual eagle claws. But every morning brought risk. Our shelters were temporary. Our food could run off on four legs. And don't get me started on the dire wolves. Those things were like your golden retriever's evil ancestor with a gym membership and attitude. I still remember the shriek of one tearing through the underbrush. That sound sticks in your head, like your ex's laugh but with fangs. My mother, sharp-eyed silent, taught me how to track the wounded and listen to snow. She had a scar that ran across her back from a saber-tooth swipe, and she wore it like a badge. She said pain was the only true map of the world. My father, before he fell into the ice river, taught me how to shape stone until it could skin a deer with one stroke. We were not dumb, just different. Adapted to cold and silence to the crackle of fire and the crunch of snow under mammoth hide boots. And yes, we spoke. Not in ways you'd understand. Clicks, hums, gestures, throat-deep growls that carried more meaning than pages ever could. Historians still debate whether we had a full language, but let me tell you, when my brother stole the last roasted marrow bone, no words were needed. It wasn't all fear and hunting. Sometimes we danced. Yes, danced. Around fire with bone flutes, humming, stamping feet, shaking dust from the cave ceiling. Someone always messed up the rhythm. Usually me. But it didn't matter. We celebrated survival. We celebrated not being dead. My first real kill was a young reindeer. I was 13 winters old, which is about 45 in Neanderthal stress years. I threw my spear, it flew wide and hit a rock. The reindeer didn't even notice. My uncle laughed so hard he nearly dropped his loincloth. But later that day, I got one. A clean strike, right behind the shoulder. The blood steamed as it spilled. I cried not from guilt, but from pride. A rite completed. That night, they painted my hands on the wall, red ochre and ash. The prints are probably still there, buried under dust, hidden in some forgotten cave. You might call it art. To us, it was proof I was now part of the hunt, part of the fire part of the story. We lived close. You had to. Caves don't offer much privacy, especially when Uncle snorts in sleep, decides to serenade the entire group. I'm serious, that man could outsnore a mammoth. And one time, we had to leave camp because someone, probably my cousin, ate bad mushrooms and thought the moon was talking. Turns out it was just an owl, a very confused owl. Still, despite the chaos, there was peace and routine. We knew the migration paths, the seasons by the way, bark peeled the temperature by how the river cracked. We knew how to coax fire from wet wood and how to stitch hides until they hugged the body like a second skin. And in those early days, we thought we were alone. Or rather, we thought we were the only ones who mattered until we saw them. Just shapes at first. Tall, thinner, upright in a strange way, like their spines hadn't learned to bend. They moved like wind through trees, and they carried strange things, long curved tools and bags that didn't sag right. Our scouts brought news of them in whispers. Not like us, they said. They laughed too much. And that was true. I would later hear it myself, their laughter. Loud, echoing, foreign. It scared me. Not because it was loud, but because it sounded like they weren't afraid. That winter, everything began to change. The mammoths didn't pass our usual path. The elk moved east following strange fire. And the caves where we once found solitude now echoed with footsteps that weren't ours. I remember asking my mother, "Who are they?" She didn't answer. She just stared into the fire like it held a warning. The valley was no longer just ours. There were shadows now moving in ways we didn't understand. And I felt the first chill of something worse than winter. They came when the frost still clung to the edges of our sleeping mats, when the breath of the wind howled like something old and angry. We'd seen their smoke, first thin trails curling from the cliffs across the river. At first, we thought it was lightning strike fire, or maybe even the gods showing off again. But it didn't fade. It grew. Then came the sounds. Laughter. Human, but not our human. Not guttural and grounded like ours. It was lighter, almost musical, and too loud, like they didn't care who heard them, which was frankly unsettling. Because out there, if you weren't quiet, you didn't last long. So we crept closer. I remember the moment I saw them. I mean, really saw them. They were standing in the clearing where our ancestors used to dry meat in summer. There were 4 of them. 2 males, 2 females. All upright, lean, and oddly symmetrical. Their skin was paler than ours, hair straighter, faces flatter. One of them, probably their leader, had his hair tied back with some kind of string. Stylish. Useless, but stylish. They were laughing at something poking a fire with sticks, wearing cloaks, dyed with colors I didn't recognize. We wore hides and ash. They wore berries and sunshine, apparently. One of them spotted us, didn't flinch, just raised a hand and smiled. I did not smile back. The only time someone raises their hand where I come from is to throw something. But they didn't throw. They invited. Against my better instincts, and after a grunted negotiation with my mother, we approached. You ever try to communicate with someone who doesn't grunt properly? It's exhausting. They gestured too much, made weird bird-like sounds. But eventually, we got it. They were not there to fight, at least not yet. They offered dried meat, not bad, a little overcooked, too much spice. My stomach didn't love it. But something else was clear. These weren't just people from a different valley. They were different, not just in the bones and skin sense, in the mind sense. Their tools were bizarre, thin stone blades, strung bows, even a curved horn they blew into that made a sound like a dying mammoth. I laughed. Couldn't help it. They laughed too. I guess humor survives species. Historically, those newcomers were Homo sapiens, your ancestors. They had walked all the way from warmer places chasing prey and dreams. They had language, art rituals, and an unfortunate tendency to claim everything they touched. a bit like toddlers with spears. One of them, a woman with hair like dried grass, showed me a necklace made of seashells. We were hundreds of miles from the sea. I stared at it, like she'd pulled a baby mammoth from her bag. Why she pointed to her chest and said something like, Nari. Was that her name? A prayer? A threat? I still don't know. That night, I returned to our cave and tried to explain what we'd seen. My brother thought I was lying. My aunt said they were demons in human skins. My mother stayed quiet. She always did when her fear outweighed her words. And look, I get it. We Neanderthals had lived alone for so long, the idea of others, actual humans who weren't us, felt like a trick. But they were real, and they weren't going away. The next day, they followed us. We were hunting near the river bend, 4 of us tracking a boar, and they just showed up waving and smiling like this was some awkward wilderness social. My cousin nearly threw his spear. I stopped him. Part curiosity, part don't want to die from their weird magic. They showed us a different way to trap the boar. Nets. I mean nets. Who thinks of that? I still don't get it. Threads woven from some fibrous plant hidden under leaves. It worked too. The boar charged and then snap-trapped, screaming, furious, delicious. After that, we began to meet more often. It was strange. We didn't talk, not really. But we shared gestures, food. Sometimes we just sat near each other and grunted in separate rhythms. Weirdly comforting. Like 2 drums, keeping separate beats, but on the same skin. Now, here's your bizarre fact of the day. One of their kids, small, loud, sticky, kept feeding mushrooms to beetles just to watch them fall over. I don't know why. He thought it was hilarious. His father didn't. I related deeply to that dynamic. Of course, not everyone was thrilled about this new interaction. My uncle said they were a threat. They laugh too much. Means they don't worry enough, he said. Worry keeps us alive. He wasn't wrong. And not just about the laughing. The new people brought with them new tools, new ideas, and as we'd later find out, new problems. Historians still debate whether Neanderthals and Homo sapiens coexisted peacefully or fought constantly. From where I stood, it was more complicated than that. There were days we shared meat, and nights we stared at each other like predators, waiting for someone to blink. There was always this tension, like we were both waiting to see who belonged more. Spoiler alert, it wasn't us. Still, I couldn't help but feel curious about them, about how far they'd come, about why they moved so much so fast. Their fire never stopped burning. Their eyes always scanned. They didn't just survive, they seemed to plan, dream, invent. And in the deep of night, I wondered, were we falling behind? I never thought bone could mean so much. Not until I saw how they used it. We had always used bones, of course, sharpened them into scrapers, carved hooks from antlers, sometimes even played a rhythm on hollow femurs if the mood struck and the mammoth meat was tender. But when I sat beside one of the tall strangers, watching him work with a bird's leg like it was sacred, I knew we were dealing with something different. He wasn't shaping it for a tool. He was decorating it, wrapping it in sinew, carving little notches in it like a counting stick. I leaned closer, and he handed it to me with a grin. The thing sang when I blew into it. A bird-bone flute, haunting and hollow. One note, just one, but it stayed in my ears for days. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would anyone waste time making music when you could be inventing? I don't know fireproof socks, but that's the thing. They didn't just survive. They thrived in ways we didn't quite understand. They played, they experimented, they believed in stories bigger than the next meal. Honestly, it was both beautiful and deeply annoying. One of them, Nari, the seashell woman, started showing up more often. She was strange, but in a way that didn't feel dangerous. One day, she showed us how they shaped antlers into needles. Needles, threading fibers through leather to make tighter, warmer clothing. My mother stared at that curved little thing like it was magic. It sort of was. In return, we taught them how to find sleeping elk by listening to wind patterns. And we gave them firestones, black and shiny ones that sparked when struck just right. They were impressed. They grunted in their chirpy way and gave us a chunk of strange dried fruit that made my cousin's stomach rebel for 2 days straight. Worth it. Historically speaking, this exchange of goods, this early trade is one of the most fascinating parts of our brief overlap with Homo sapiens. There's evidence of Neanderthal tools found alongside human artifacts suggesting we didn't just fight each other. We shared, learned, borrowed. Some of us anyway, but not all. There were days when something darker lingered between us, like the time a group of their hunters followed ours too closely, watching where we moved, how we killed. My uncle called it shadow learning. He didn't like it. He said they were too clever, too eager to take without asking. He wasn't wrong. Sometimes they looked at our firestones the way a wolf eyes a limping deer. And then came the night of the fire. They brought torches, long ones wrapped in oily bark, and walked right into the edge of our camp, laughing again, like everything was just fine. They mimed a request for trade. Nari gave us red powder ochre from a place far away, she said. We gave them more tools, a bone comb, and some smoked reindeer strips. Then, one of them, tall man broken tooth, reached for my sister's bracelet. A simple thing. Twined teeth, a tiny, carved bear. She pulled back. He kept reaching. Our cousin stepped forward. So did theirs. And just like that, the moment cracked. We didn't fight, not that night. But we didn't trade again for many moons. Tension hung thick after that. Every time they passed near our valley, we stood armed. Every time we crossed their trails, we saw newer prints, more organized, faster moving, and always just ahead of us. They were multiplying and spreading. Even so, the strangest part, I missed them. We'd started to mimic them. It's true. My brother carved his spear with a human-style grip. My aunt started braiding her hair like Nari. I even tried mimicking their laughter once late at night, just to see how it felt. It sounded wrong coming from me, like a wolf trying to sing, but the influence was real. Historians still debate whether Neanderthals were replaced, absorbed, or wiped out by humans. From my cave-side view, it was all of the above. We copied what worked. We adopted what helped us survive. And sometimes that meant blending slowly, quietly with the people we once feared. But here's a bizarre detail I'll never forget. One of their children, barely walking, brought me a fish. Whole raw and still flopping. Just waddled over and dropped it in my lap. I blinked, unsure what kind of social ritual this was. I looked around. Everyone just nodded. I nodded back. Took the fish, ate it later. Still unsure if I was accidentally engaged to that child's family. The point is, even with tension, there were these flashes of something more. Maybe not love, but connection. We'd both been shaped by the same wind, the same hunt, the same ancient sky. We just reacted differently. They told stories through symbols on wood and stone. We told stories through rhythm and fire. They danced in groups. We danced in shadows. They believed the stars were maps. We believed the caves held spirits. Different faiths, different faces. But maybe, just maybe, one shared fear that the world would one day forget us. Looking back, I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed separate. If we had never traded, never touched, never let our women braid flowers into their hair, and let their songs slip into our dreams. But we did. And with every bone fire and whispered gesture, our two worlds moved closer. Closer than I realized at the time. Close enough that one day we would start to disappear. Not with a bang, not with war, but with mixing and forgetting. It started quietly, like all endings do. That spring, two of our young women vanished. They had gone to the southern lake to gather herbs, like they always did. They were sisters, barely old enough to birth, but old enough to wander without a guard. My mother said they'd be fine fast on their feet and clever with wild dogs. But they didn't return. We searched for 3 days. My cousin found their tracks deep fresh and leading across a path we rarely crossed. A path that led dangerously close to the newcomers' camp. We didn't know what to do. Accuse them. Attack them. Wait, on the 5th day, the girls returned. They were unharmed, smiling even. But something had shifted in them. Their eyes darted in new rhythms. They wore strange beads around their necks, dyed cloth across their shoulders. One of them had markings on her arm, not scars, but tiny, etched lines in red and black. Decorative, deliberate, foreign. They said they had stayed with the others by choice, that the humans, yes, I'm calling them that now, had welcomed them, fed them, taught them songs. One girl, Mira, hummed a melody I'd never heard before. It made my spine itch. The other Kala just stared into the fire and rubbed her belly. She didn't need to say it. We all knew. She was with child. Now here's the historical part. Genetic evidence shows that many modern humans outside of Africa carry Neanderthal DNA. Somewhere, sometime, our species intertwined. You might think of it romantically. It wasn't. It was messy, awkward, and strange. Sometimes consensual, sometimes not. But it happened. And when Kala's belly grew, so did our unease. My uncle called it betrayal. She's carrying a stranger's blood, he spat. Not ours. My mother disagreed. But she said nothing aloud. Just stroked Kala's hair in the evenings and fed her boiled roots the way one does when you know a child is coming whether you like it or not. There were whispers, of course. Some wanted to cast her out. Others wanted to steal the child once it was born. Some even said the baby would be cursed, neither one of us nor one of them. A creature in between. Like a wolf with a rabbit's heart. And me, I didn't know what to think. I just kept watching her, watching them. Watching everything we knew crack like ice in spring. Narration came to see Kala once. Just once. She brought herbs and a pouch of bright blue powder that turned the water sweet. They didn't speak much, just sat beside each other, both aware of the quiet distance between their worlds. When Nari left, she kissed Kala's forehead. We'd never seen that before. We didn't kiss. Not like that. It felt intimate, kind, confusing. After that, everything got stranger. Kala began to speak in short bursts of their language. At first, just a word or two Tommy Un. But soon, she was naming things with sounds none of us understood. When she gave birth, she whispered a word into her child's ear that sounded more like birdsong than anything I'd ever heard. Avon, she said. His name is Avon. We didn't know what to do with him. He looked like us, mostly. But there were differences. Lighter skin, smaller brow. A cry that rose and fell, like music, not bark. My brother said he was cute. My uncle said he was a curse. My mother just said, he is here. That is all. Historians still debate whether this kind of integration was common or rare. From where I stood, it wasn't just common, it was inevitable. Once the door opened, it didn't close. Avon grew quickly. Learned to walk faster than most. Learned to laugh like the others. That same unafraid, high-pitched sound that made our elders flinch. One night, he wandered into our fire circle, holding a piece of fruit none of us had ever seen. Orange, sweet, sticky. He offered it to me. I took it, ate it. Delicious, sticky for days. And here's your bizarre fact of the day the humans had figured out how to plant seeds near their camp and make fruit grow where fruit had no business growing. I watched it with my own eyes. Dirt, water, and time. Sorcery, if you asked me. But beneath all that wonder was fear. Because with every new word Kala spoke, with every song Nari taught her, with every item we traded and borrowed and mimicked, we lost something. Our rhythm softened, our tongue twisted into strange shapes, our rituals shrank forgotten. One of my cousins stopped drumming altogether, said it wasn't needed anymore. He began carving the way they carved, writing in shapes instead of sounds. We were still Neanderthals, but less so. And when the next woman left on purpose, this time following Nari into the night, with a full satchel and no goodbyes, I understood something. We weren't being killed. We were being absorbed, slowly, gently, like ink in water. We didn't disappear with a scream. We faded with a whisper. It was the reindeer that started it. We had always followed the herds. Their migration was our calendar, our map, our rhythm. When they moved, we moved. When they stopped, we built fire. When they birthed, we feasted. And when they ran dry, we feared. One morning, while frost still curled on the edges of my nose and my joints popped like snapping twigs, we noticed the tracks were fewer, scattered, nervous. The big bulls were missing entirely. Something had changed. At first, we blamed wolves. Then we blamed the weather. Then, reluctantly, we blamed the humans, because they had been there too. But when we reached the valley, where the herds usually rested, what we found wasn't broken branches or scattered bones, it was traps. Pits. Snares. Complex, brutal smart. Covered with woven grass and anchored with wooden spikes. The kind of thing you don't invent unless you've had a lot of spare time and a questionable relationship with physics. And in one of them lay a reindeer. Dead. Its neck snapped clean, its eyes wide open. At the edge of the pit, a boot print. Thin sole, narrow heel. Not one of ours. That's when my brother snapped. He picked up a stone and hurled it into the trees, roaring. They take everything. Even the animals. He wasn't wrong. They had taken our hunt, our food, our patterns. Historically, Homo sapiens had more efficient tools, composite spears, atlatls, bows. They used distance to their advantage. We, the Neanderthals, got up close. Brave, yes. Efficient, not really. Especially when the game began to disappear, faster than we could chase it. Still, we tried to adapt. We learned what we could from their traps. I even built one. Took me days. Caught exactly one squirrel. I named him Slippy. He bit me and ran. Fair enough. We began to follow the herds farther than we ever had, away from our known shelters, deeper into unknown woods. And every time we moved, so did they. It felt like a dance. A very frustrating one, where both partners step on each other's toes and no one admits they're out of sync. But the worst part, they accused us. One cold dusk, a group of them approached. Faces tight, weapons drawn. No smiles this time. Their leader shouted something we half understood. You take, you steal, kill. Nari wasn't with them. I tried to explain. We hunted, yes, but not their kill. We never touched what we hadn't tracked. But they didn't believe us. One man, wiry and short-tempered, pointed at our pack, where a fresh reindeer leg peeked out. My brother moved forward to protect it. Tension flared, spears rose. It nearly ended there. Blood in the snow. Fire on the furs. But Kala stepped between us, holding her child, Avon, still only a few seasons old, with his eyes that mirrored theirs and his arms that clung to mine like I was both uncle and alien. The humans backed down, for now. Historians still debate whether these confrontations were widespread or isolated. Maybe somewhere else, Neanderthals and humans threw feasts and danced under the stars. But not here, not in our valley. Here every shared glance was a gamble, every shared path a risk. And then came the council. We met those of us still willing to sit around a fire and talk without shouting. We discussed what to do. Some wanted war, others wanted to leave. I said, if we run, we will run forever. My mother said, if we stay, we vanish. She was right. I hate how often she was right. That night, I went to the humans' camp alone. Foolish, yes. But I needed answers. They let me in. Or rather, they didn't stop me. Neri found me first standing near their fire, staring at their tools, their endless chatter, their children laughing at shadows like the cold had never existed. She gave me dried berries. I took them. She showed me one of their bows. I held it, pulled the string, snapped it. She didn't laugh, just nodded. We didn't talk, not in words, but I knew what she meant. This was theirs now, not just the kill, not just the tools, the future. Here's your bizarre fact. One of their elders was carving tiny dolls out of fish bones. For fun, for fun. I barely had time to breathe, and this guy was making action figures. That's the difference right there. When I returned to our cave, I found my brother packing. He said he'd found a new route northwest, past the ice cliffs, where maybe no one had gone yet. No people, I asked. No people, he promised. But I saw the doubt in his eyes. The world was shrinking. Every step we took seemed to lead us back to them. Every kill we made was a kill they had already marked. Every word we spoke was starting to echo in another tongue. We were still ourselves, but only barely. The drums were quieter that night, the fire lower. Even the children stopped their play early, as if they sensed it too. The shift, the slow theft of space, not by blood, but by cleverness. And that, I think, is what scared me most. Not that they would kill us, but that they would outthink us. That winter was the worst I can remember. And I've lived through my fair share of bad ones, like the year the river froze so fast it swallowed a deer mid-drink, or the time our furs caught fire because someone, I won't name names, but he snored like a mammoth, built the fire too close to our bedding. But this winter, this one had teeth. The sky stayed gray for moons. Snow piled high against our cave mouth, burying the paths we once wandered like forgotten dreams. Our breath hung in the air longer than our conversations. Even our fire seemed to shrink, as if it too was tired of trying. We rationed everything: dried roots, shavings of smoked meat, even melted bone marrow scraped from old kills. And when those ran out, we chewed bark, sucked on rocks, told ourselves stories to quiet the hunger gnawing behind our ribs. The humans, though, oh, they were thriving. We watched from the ridges. They had stockpiles, stacks of food wrapped in hides, big fires, singing, laughter, again with the laughter. I swear, if I had a rock for every time I heard one of them laugh, while my stomach curled into itself, I could have built a second cave out of sheer rage. And the worst part, they looked healthy. No frostbite, no hacking coughs, no children with sunken cheeks. While our little ones coughed through the nights, theirs ran around tossing snow like it was a game. One of ours, Len, a boy no older than 10 winters, died in his sleep. No sound, no warning, just stopped breathing. We wrapped him in furs and carried him to the cliff, as tradition demanded. My brother sang the goodbye song, voice cracking like ice. The humans watched from the woods, said nothing. Historically, It's believed that Homo sapiens were more resilient to illness. They built better shelters, wore tighter clothing, preserved food more effectively. Meanwhile, we Neanderthals struggled with sudden climate shifts and limited resources. Our immune systems were not designed for crowding or close contact. Diseases spread like whispers, lethal ones. That's the thing people forget. Extinction doesn't always come with a roar. Sometimes it comes as a sniffle, a slow weakening, 1,000 tiny goodbyes that no one remembers. We started seeing signs in the caves too. Black residue on the walls, faded handprints that flaked at the edges, like even the stone was tired of us. Some blamed the humans, said they brought sickness with their strange food, their painted skin, their complicated ways. Others said it was the sky gods. Punishment for mixing blood, for learning their words, for letting Kala raise her child in the old cave like it was just another cradle. Me, I didn't know what to believe anymore. The animals were fewer, the cold harsher. Even the wind had changed direction, as if it no longer bothered to sweep through our camp, as if it had forgotten our name. One evening, I went walking. No destination, just moving. My feet knew the paths better than my thoughts did. That's when I found her, Nari, alone, crouched over a stream that hadn't frozen entirely, using a sharpened bone to carve something in the dirt. When she saw me, she didn't reach for her weapon. She just nodded. I nodded back. She looked older, tired, but still intact. Still her. We didn't speak. What could we say? Sorry, our species are in a cold war while the planet dies. Awkward. Instead, she reached into her pouch and handed me something small. A bundle. Inside, dried fruit, a few strange nuts, a piece of cloth wrapped around a doll, made of fur, stuffed with grass. Button eyes. I almost cried. Not from sentiment, from exhaustion, from the realization that some human thought enough to send help. Bizarre fact. Some Neanderthal remains have been found with evidence of medical care. Healed bones, amputations, even signs of long-term survival after serious injury. So yes, we cared for each other. We just weren't always good at asking for help. Pride is a heavy fur to carry. I returned to camp and gave the food to Kala. She broke it into tiny pieces and fed Avon bit by bit. He clapped, laughed. I hated how sweet it sounded. Later, our elders met again. Some said we should migrate south, away from the cold and the humans. But south was already taken, and the sea offered no mercy. Others wanted to confront them, demand food, trade more, risk more, and some were just done. Their eyes vacant, their hands trembling, their spirits already buried beneath snow. Historians still debate how fast it happened. The fade, the fall, maybe it took generations, maybe just one. All I know is in that winter, something snapped. Not a scream, a silence, a surrender. I began sleeping farther from the others. Not out of malice, just distance. The cave felt smaller, the walls too close. My dreams filled with fire and songs I didn't recognize. Avon toddled out to me once in the night, his little hands full of snow, his eyes glowing like frostlight. He said something in their tongue I didn't understand. He laughed and ran back to his mother. I sat there staring at the stars, wondering what they saw. A world where we no longer belonged, or a world that was already moving on. We called it the Red Cave. It sat 3 valleys over, tucked behind a wall of jagged rock and thorny undergrowth that kept most predators and, let's be honest, clumsy cousins away. It was sacred to us even before the humans arrived. Not for gods or spirits necessarily, but because of what was left there. Paintings. Not made by us, but by those before even our time. red and black streaks across the stone, handprints smaller than any child's, animals frozen mid-charge, a spiral of dots that made my head spin every time I stared too long. That cave whispered things, and sometimes, if you listened just right, it whispered back. It was where we held naming rights and where we buried twins born silent, where we danced when we had reason to be glad and hid when we had reason to fear. It was ours until it wasn't. I don't know who lit the fire first, whether it was deliberate or some accident, a spark from a torch, or the careless knock of flint against bark. But I remember the smoke-thick bitter pouring out of the rocks like the cave itself was choking. We saw it from the ridge, all of us. My brother ran first, then my mother, then all of us scrambling down slopes like deer with fire on our heels. By the time we got there, it was too late. The paintings were gone, burnt, melted into streaks of soot and shame. Bones cracked and blackened in the ash. Even the air felt wrong, like it hated us. They had been there. We found the signs, the footprints, the crushed ferns, the unfamiliar arrow shaft half buried in the dirt, carved with symbols none of us understood. Not ours, my cousin screamed, and then ran. 3 of them followed my brother, the boy we called Bareface, and a hot-headed fool with a broken nose and a deep grudge. They did not return. The next morning, we found Bareface, alone, bleeding from the shoulder, crying, not from pain, but from what he'd seen. He said they were ambushed, that one of them, the broken-nosed fool, had thrown a spear first. A woman screamed, then chaos. They killed our men, took Bareface's necklace and let him crawl away like a warning. I didn't speak for 2 days. We sat around the dying fire, the smoke from our sacred cave still hanging in our hair. My uncle pounded his fists against the cave wall until they bled. My mother held Avon like a talisman. Kala cried quietly endlessly, and me, I watched the horizon, waiting for shadows to move. Historically, we still don't know how much direct violence occurred between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Evidence is mixed. Some fossils show trauma, others don't. Some caves seem abandoned in haste, others co-occupied. But from where I stood, there was no more peace. Only the slow unraveling of the threads that barely held us together. The humans didn't return to trade. They didn't smile anymore. They didn't laugh. They started patrolling. We saw them in groups, always armed, always alert, moving like wolves guarding territory. We weren't visitors anymore. We were intruders, trespassers. One night, my brother's mate, a quiet girl with a talent for carving bird feathers from bone, slipped away into the trees. No goodbye. No firelight behind her. We never saw her again. They say she left to join them. Others say she walked into the river and let it take her. I don't know what to believe anymore. Kala tried to bring peace. She took Avon, still not yet old enough to count fingers, and approached the edge of the humans' new camp with food. A sign of goodwill. They didn't take it. They didn't harm her, but they turned her away. Avon cried all night. The next morning, we found a warning etched into the trees near our path. Lines, circles, a crude shape of a hand palm open and fingers spread wide. We didn't know what it meant, but we felt it. The message was clear. Stay away. Here's your bizarre fact of the day. Some Neanderthal remains show evidence of being buried with tools in their hands, as if even in death, they were preparing for the next world to be just as difficult. Funny how some instincts don't change. We stopped using the red cave, stopped singing, stopped painting. Even our drums fell silent. I started dreaming of different things. Not fire, not herds, but cities. Strange word, right? Cities. Walls and light. Faces like mine, but taller, smarter, faster, laughing with that same lilt I heard in the humans long ago. In the dream, I was invisible, walking among them, but never noticed, never remembered. And when I woke up, that's exactly how I felt. Fading, not in pain, just forgotten. The land no longer echoed our names. The animals no longer paused at our scent. The snow no longer held our shapes. We were becoming shadows, and shadows don't leave handprints. The hills were quieter now, too quiet. You don't notice that kind of silence right away. It creeps in. First, it's just the absence of birdsong. Then, no rustling in the trees. And finally, no voices by the fire. The kind of quiet that doesn't just hush the air. It presses on your chest, makes your thoughts feel heavier, like they're made of wet fur and snow. One by one, our families vanished. Not in flashes, not in violence, just gone. The group across the river stopped responding to our smoke signals. We sent scouts too came back. Said the cave was empty, blankets folded, bones swept clean, fire pit cold. No signs of struggle, no signs of a feast. Just silence and an overturned clay pot. A month later, the family who lived near the spruce grove disappeared too. Tracks showed they'd moved west. We followed for a day, found a child's doll by a broken birch tree, and then nothing. Not even footprints, as if the wind had erased them on purpose. I stayed awake more after that, watching the tree line, counting stars, counting people. We were down to 11, and one of them was Avon, who was still too small to throw a stone and too young to understand why his mother cried when she thought no one could see her. The strange thing is, no one said it out loud, that we were dying, that this might be the end. We just stopped planning for the next season. No talk of furs to tan, no repairs to the meat rack, no new paint for the walls. What was the point? Historically, archaeologists have found Neanderthal remains in layers thinner than human ones, fewer burials, fewer artifacts over time. It wasn't a war, it was a withdrawal, a retreat from the world that no longer answered us. Some nights, I still heard their drums, far off faint. The humans, their rhythm was different, faster, lighter. I never quite got used to it. We saw one of their scouts once, just a flash through the trees. He didn't approach, didn't run, just stood there watching us. I raised a hand. He did not raise his. After that, we stopped using fire outside. Too easy to spot. The cold crept in again. Not as fierce as the last winter, but worse in a way I can't describe. The kind that settles in your bones and whispers, "Why bother?" We stopped marking the caves, stopped carving stories. The last one I made was a handprint, mine, next to Avon's. His was smaller, clearer, still learning. That handprint's probably still there. Or maybe it's crumbled by now, faded like the voice that made it. One morning we woke to find Bareface dead. No wound, just gone. Laid down near the fire and didn't wake up. My mother placed a stone in his palm, kissed his brow, and said the sky would know him. We didn't bury him, not enough strength for digging. We burned what wood we had and left the bones to the snow. Avon asked if Bareface would come back. Kala didn't answer. The air was thinner, or maybe our breath had grown shorter. I kept trying to remember everyone's faces. My cousins, my brother, the women who vanished, the ones who laughed loudest, who danced longest. But memory is tricky. It doesn't hold shape the way bones do. It melts, it blurs, like the cave paintings. One morning, I went to our old shelter, just to see. The one we used in spring, before the world had changed. There was moss growing over the entrance. The fire pit had collapsed. Inside, I found a single tooth, just lying there. Human, probably mine. Here's your bizarre fact of the day. There's a theory that Neanderthals used eagle talons for jewelry, and not just decoration, but perhaps status. You can imagine me standing there alone, holding a tooth, and thinking, should I start wearing claws? Might be too late for a fashion statement now. My mother stopped speaking soon after. Not sick, not wounded, just quiet. She looked at the sky a lot, smiled sometimes. Not the happy kind, the kind that feels like goodbye. And then one morning, she didn't wake up either. I didn't cry. I carried her to the edge of the hill, the one that caught the last light in the evenings. I sat there beside her until the stars came out. I whispered every name I could remember, and when I ran out, I whispered her name again. Historians still debate whether the last Neanderthals knew they were the last, whether they realized they were closing a book no one would finish. I think we did. I think we felt the pages slipping, not with panic, just with stillness. We didn't rage. We didn't roar. We watched the humans take our tools and make them better. Watched their children grow strong where ours faded. Watched their songs replace ours. Watched our memories become echoes in caves that no longer knew us. Sometimes I wonder if the humans still remember us at all, or if they just see fossils, tools, curved bones, and worn teeth. I wonder if they know we loved, that we cared, that we laughed, we danced, we mourned, we existed. Because we did, even if the hills no longer say our names. It's strange being the last. I don't mean the last to arrive at a fire, or the last to eat. I mean the kind of last that echoes, that stays in the cold long after the others are gone, that walks with no one to follow and no one to lead, the kind of last that makes even the wind feel awkward. I wandered for days, no map, no destination, just the heavy shuffle of my own feet and the quiet cracking of frost beneath my steps. I passed empty caves, hollow dens, trees that had once bent beneath the weight of our laughter now stood stiff, like they were pretending nothing had ever happened. I talked to myself sometimes, not because I was lonely, though I was, but because I wanted to hear what a Neanderthal voice sounded like in a world that had moved on. It sounded old, thick, too heavy for the air, like a river trying to speak after it's dried up. I tried to remember songs. Half of them escaped me. The words ran off, but the rhythms stayed. I hummed while I walked, tapping bone against bark, whispering the names of people who were now ash dust and fading footprints. One day, I found a pile of stones arranged carefully beneath a twisted tree, a burial, not one of ours. A human child, I think. They'd left carvings on the rocks, circles, waves, a tiny spiral like the ones in our red cave. I stood there a long time, touching the symbols, wondering had someone taught them, that had one of us shown them how to remember, had we left a mark after all. Historically, genetic evidence shows that modern humans, yes, you still carry fragments of Neanderthal DNA, somewhere in your blood, in the lines around your eyes, in the way your bones grow dense and strong. We linger. We were not erased, just blended. Still in those days, I felt more ghost than man. I watched humans pass at a distance. They walked in pairs and groups. They built shelters, lit fires that didn't flicker with fear. They told stories I couldn't hear. They laughed in a language I no longer understood. I didn't approach. Not anymore. I was too wild, too ancient, too obvious. One child saw me once, just a flash through the trees. Our eyes met hers wide with surprise, mine tired. She didn't scream, just stared. I raised a hand. She raised hers. Then her mother pulled her away. I stood there for a while. The wind shifted, and I realized I hadn't smelled another of my kind in weeks. Not a footprint, not a fire, not even the lingering scent of sweat on a stone. Just me. Ivan and Kala had moved south with a mixed group, some human, some in between like her. She had offered to take me with them. I declined, said I liked the quiet, which was a lie. I hated the quiet, but it was the only thing I had left. They cried when they left. Ivan hugged my leg. I didn't know what to do with my hands. I just held his head for a moment, breathed him in. Then they were gone. After that, I stopped counting the days. I stopped hunting with purpose. Just picked berries when I could find them, caught fish if the river wasn't frozen. Scavenged old bones when hunger grew mean. You ever hear the sound of a world forgetting you? It's like birds not stopping to look, like snow falling with no prints, like your own voice becoming strange in your ears. One morning, I stood at the edge of a wide cliff, one we used to leap from into soft snowbanks as children. It was smaller now, or maybe I was just older. I looked out at the valley. Green was starting to return. Life didn't stop. It just didn't need us anymore. And here's your bizarre fact for today. Some Neanderthals may have survived much longer than we thought. Tiny groups, isolated in pockets, even as recently as 30,000 years ago. A few voices whispering into time. Like mine, sometimes I wonder if others are out there, watching, hiding, waiting. But I doubt it. I've stopped dreaming of them. Now, I dream of things I've never seen. Metal birds in the sky. Glowing stones in your hands. Voices coming from boxes. I don't know where those images come from. Maybe they're your memories leaking backward into mine. Maybe I'm not the last, just the last to remember. Historians still debate what finally ended us. Climate competition, disease, interbreeding. Truth is it wasn't one thing. It was time. Time made for others. Not worse. Not better. Just different. And so I walk, not with sorrow anymore. Not even with longing. Just with memory. I walk so I don't disappear. I walk so that somewhere, somehow when a child draws a spiral in the dirt, they don't know why it feels right, but it does. Because that was us. We were here. And though the caves are cold and the drums are silent, though the echoes grow fainter with each season, I am still walking, still humming, still remembering. I remember the fire. Not the one that cooked meat or kept us from freezing, but the one inside. The flicker behind the eyes, the rhythm in the chest, the warmth that said you belong here. That fire is what kept us alive for so long. Through blizzards, injuries, hunger, and fear. It burned low sometimes, but it burned until one day I realized I was carrying it alone. I don't know how long it's been now, huh? The seasons pass without names. The stars shift. The wind still speaks, but it no longer whispers in our voice. The birds return each spring, but they do not land near me. They do not know who I am. I found a cave yesterday, small, dry, lined with moss. Someone had lived there, recently too. I saw soot marks near the ceiling, bones of rabbits arranged in a spiral. But the scent wasn't ours, it was theirs, the humans, or the ones like Kala and Avon. In between, I left without disturbing it. That space belonged to someone else now, someone who still had people. I sleep lightly now, not because I'm afraid, but because the silence wakes me more than noise ever did. The silence of being the last. My dreams are stranger these days. I dream of things I could never name. Mountains made of glass, animals with glowing eyes, lights in the sky that move like fireflies and vanish with no sound. Sometimes I see figures with smooth skin and strange clothes, and they look at me like I'm a question no one wants to answer. Maybe these dreams are your memories, or maybe they're mind twisting into stories because the mind doesn't know how to be alone forever. Historically, Neanderthals left little behind that we can fully understand. No books, no grand monuments, just tools, bones, and the red handprints on cave walls. But I think those were enough. Proof we existed, proof we mattered, even if your museums forget to smile when they talk about us. You want to know the truth. We weren't perfect. We fought. We got scared. We made mistakes. But we lived. We loved our children. We told stories. We watched the stars and wondered if they watched us back. We danced. We carved beauty from stone. We laughed at things that didn't matter. And in the end, we did what all things do. We changed. I've come back now to the first cave. The one where my mother taught me to shape flint and where I first saw my breath cloud the air. The old fire pit is still here, buried beneath dust and leaves. I sat beside it tonight and sang the lullaby she used to hum. It's not much of a song, just 3 notes. But it rises, then falls, then rests, like life does. Avon must be grown now. I hope he remembers me. Not my face I know that fades, but the way I held him awkward and terrified, and the way I tried to hum a human song while pretending it was ours. I hope his children feel that mix inside them, the weight of us, the wonder of them. I hope someone tells them about the people who came before, with heavy brows and fire-stained hands, who walked in snow and shadow and left their shapes on cave walls. And here's your bizarre final fact. They found traces of Neanderthal DNA in your sense of smell. That's right. The way you react to scents, spices, smoke, even sweat may carry me inside it. So the next time you smell the earth after rain or meat roasting on fire or wet fur in the cold, maybe pause and listen. There is a part of you that remembers, a part that once sat beside me, that once shaped stones with care, that once hummed 3 notes by a fading fire. So now, as the stars rise one more time and the wind forgets how to say my name, I leave this last gift, a memory of who we were, of what we tried to hold on to, and of how we walked into silence, not with fear, but with fire. Word count 100, 300-word closing summary. If you're still here, thank you. Really. I know that was a lot. A journey through snow and silence, through echoes and endings. But you stayed. You listened. And in doing so, you let me live again for just a little while. The story of Neanderthals isn't just about extinction. It's about memory, about connection, about the quiet resilience of a people who didn't write books or build kingdoms, but who held their children close, shaped the world with their hands, and watched as it changed into something unfamiliar. We didn't vanish because we were weak. We vanished because the world chose a different path. One filled with complexity, with invention, with cities and screens and satellites. But inside all that, inside you, we still exist. In fragments of bone, in genetic echoes, in the curve of a nose, or the rhythm of your sleep. And maybe that's enough. So tonight, as you drift off, or sit quietly letting the story settle in your chest, remember the hills. Remember the caves. Remember the ones who came before and spoke without words, because remembering, even softly, even briefly, is a kind of survival too. Thank you for listening, and if you feel like it, like and subscribe. Good night.